The Gaza Strip is facing a dire humanitarian crisis. Thousands of tons of aid are stuck at its borders, unable to reach those in desperate need. The situation is critical, with reports of widespread hunger and a collapsing healthcare system. Over 3,000 trucks filled with essential supplies are idle, their contents useless to the beleaguered population. Adding to the devastation, recent reports confirm that 57 Gazans have died from hunger, a grim testament to the severity of the situation. The international community watches with growing concern as the crisis deepens. The lack of access to food, water, and medical supplies has created a life-threatening situation for the people of Gaza. The basic necessities of life have become luxuries, pushing the already vulnerable population to the brink. The world must act now to prevent further suffering and loss of life. A swift and coordinated response is crucial to avert a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. The urgency of the situation demands immediate attention and action from global leaders. At the heart of the crisis lies the blockade imposed on Gaza. This blockade severely restricts the flow of goods and people, effectively isolating the territory from the outside world. Israel controls Gaza's land, sea, and air access, making it nearly impossible for aid to reach its intended recipients. The blockade, in place for over a decade, has crippled Gaza's economy and infrastructure. It has led to widespread poverty, unemployment, and a lack of essential resources. The people of Gaza face daily struggles to meet their basic needs, trapped in a cycle of deprivation and despair. This control extends to the very aid intended to alleviate the suffering. Israel has announced plans to use U.S. security contractors to oversee the entry of aid into Gaza, bypassing established UN agencies. This move raises serious concerns about the politicization of aid and the potential for manipulation. The blockade, rather than serving its stated security objectives, has exacerbated the humanitarian crisis. It has created a pressure cooker environment where desperation and anger fester. The international community must pressure Israel to lift the blockade and allow for the free flow of aid and goods into Gaza. The use of aid as a bargaining chip is a dangerous precedent. By controlling the flow of aid, Israel holds the lives of Gazans hostage to political maneuvering. This manipulation of essential supplies is unacceptable and violates international humanitarian law. The consequences of this strategy are dire. Hospitals in Gaza are running out of essential medicines and equipment. Patients are being turned away, unable to receive life-saving treatment. The shortage of medical supplies is a direct result of the blockade and the deliberate obstruction of aid. The international community must condemn the use of aid as a political tool. Access to essential supplies should never be contingent on political concessions. The lives of civilians, particularly the most vulnerable, should not be used as leverage in any conflict. The politicization of aid only deepens the suffering in Gaza. It undermines the principles of humanitarian assistance and erodes trust in those who claim to be helping. The focus must shift to ensuring the unconditional delivery of aid to those who desperately need it. The humanitarian crisis unfolds against a backdrop of renewed conflict. Tensions between Israel and Hamas, the de facto governing authority in Gaza, have escalated in recent weeks, leading to a surge in violence. The exchange of rocket fire and airstrikes has resulted in civilian casualties on both sides, further fueling the cycle of violence. Adding to the volatility, the Israeli army chief has announced the mobilization of tens of thousands of reservists. This move signals a potential escalation of military operations in Gaza, raising fears of a wider conflict. The consequences of such an escalation would be devastating for the already beleaguered civilian population. The mobilization of troops raises serious concerns about the proportionality of the Israeli response. The use of overwhelming military force against a densely populated area like Gaza is likely to result in significant civilian casualties and further destruction of infrastructure. The international community must urge restraint and de-escalation. A return to negotiations and a peaceful resolution to the conflict are the only viable options to prevent further suffering and loss of life. The cycle of violence must be broken to create a space for addressing the underlying issues fueling the conflict. Section 5. Houthi missiles, expanding the conflict. Adding another layer of complexity to the crisis is the involvement of external actors. Houthi rebels in Yemen, aligned with Iran, have fired missiles towards Israel, striking near Ben Gurion Airport. These attacks, while causing panic and disruption, have resulted in no casualties. The Houthi attacks, however, have significant implications for the region. They demonstrate the potential for the conflict to spread beyond Gaza, drawing in other regional players. The involvement of non-state actors adds to the volatility and unpredictability of the situation. Israel has responded to the Houthi attacks with airstrikes on targets in Yemen. These strikes, while presented as a retaliation against the Houthis, risk further destabilizing the region and exacerbating the humanitarian crisis in Yemen. The international community must engage in diplomatic efforts to prevent the conflict's expansion. Containing the crisis within Gaza and preventing its spillover into neighboring countries is crucial. The focus should remain on de-escalation and finding a peaceful resolution to the conflict. Section 6. Iran's stance, a shadow over the crisis. Iran's role in the crisis adds another dimension to the already complex situation. Iran's support for Hamas and the Houthi rebels has been cited by Israel as justification for its actions. Iran, in turn, has condemned Israeli aggression and threatened retaliation for any attacks on its territory. The escalating rhetoric between Iran and Israel raises concerns about a potential direct confrontation between the two regional powers. Such a confrontation would have catastrophic consequences for the entire region, drawing in other countries and potentially igniting a wider war. While Iran's support for groups opposed to Israel is well documented, its direct involvement in the current crisis remains unclear. Attributing blame and assigning motives without concrete evidence only serves to escalate tensions and hinder efforts to find a peaceful resolution. The international community must urge all parties to exercise restraint and avoid actions that could lead to further escalation. Dialogue and diplomacy, rather than threats and military action, are the only path towards a sustainable peace in the region. Section 7. The world watches, a failure to act. The international community's response to the crisis in Gaza has been widely criticized as inadequate. Despite the dire humanitarian situation and the escalating violence, there has been no significant action taken to address the root causes of the conflict or provide meaningful assistance to those affected. The United Nations Security Council, the body tasked with maintaining international peace and security, has been largely paralyzed by divisions among its permanent members. The United States, a staunch ally of Israel, has repeatedly blocked resolutions condemning Israeli actions or calling for a ceasefire. This inaction has devastating consequences for the people of Gaza. The lack of international pressure allows Israel to act with impunity, perpetuating the blockade and continuing its military operations without accountability. The international community must move beyond condemnations and symbolic gestures. Concrete actions are needed to hold all parties accountable for their actions and to provide real assistance to those suffering in Gaza. Silence and inaction are not neutral. They are a form of complicity in the ongoing injustice. Section 8. Echoes of History, Lessons Unlearned. The current crisis in Gaza is not an isolated incident, but rather the latest chapter in a long and tragic conflict. The roots of the conflict run deep, stemming from historical grievances, territorial disputes, and the unresolved question of Palestinian statehood. The failure to address the underlying issues has led to a perpetual cycle of violence and suffering. Each escalation further entrenches the divisions and makes a peaceful resolution more elusive. The international community's repeated failures to learn from the past have condemned generations to a life of conflict and uncertainty. The situation in Gaza serves as a stark reminder of the human cost of inaction and the urgent need for a just and lasting peace. Ignoring history's lessons only perpetuates the cycle of violence and suffering. The international community must recognize there can be no peace without justice. Addressing the root causes of the conflict, including the occupation, the blockade, and the denial of Palestinian self-determination, is essential for achieving a lasting and sustainable peace. Section 9. A call for justice, breaking the cycle. The crisis in Gaza is a tragedy unfolding in real time. The suffering of the Palestinian people, particularly in Gaza, can no longer be ignored. The international community must act decisively to break the cycle of violence and address the root causes of the conflict. Ending the blockade is paramount. Gaza's people cannot be held hostage to political maneuvering. The free flow of aid, goods, and people must be restored to alleviate the humanitarian crisis and provide a foundation for economic recovery. Accountability is crucial. Those responsible for violations of international law, whether Israeli or Palestinian, must be held accountable for their actions. Impunity only breeds further violence and undermines the pursuit of justice. Ultimately, a just and lasting peace requires a political solution. This solution must address the legitimate aspirations of both Israelis and Palestinians, including the right to self-determination and a life of dignity and freedom. The crisis in Gaza is a test for the international community. It is a test of our humanity, our commitment to justice, and our willingness to act in the face of oppression. The time for empty words and symbolic gestures has long passed. The world must act now to end the suffering of Gaza and forge a path towards a just and lasting peace.